So I'm finally getting around to talking about the Nioh 2 beta. I figured I might as well talk about it since I do have footage that I happen to record and am not using at the moment, so I need an excuse to use it. That being all said, this is going to be an off-the-cuff video. I didn't really feel like scripting this one, and I don't really have a whole lot to say about the beta. There are some things I do want to complain about, but otherwise there is not much that I have to say because there's a lot of similarities going into, if you're coming in from Nioh 1 going into Nioh 2, there are just a lot of similarities between the games. There are some differences, of course, but more or less Nioh 2 feels like Nioh 1.5, but we'll get into that towards the end of the video, or well, not end of the video, I'd say midway point of the video, and then also the end of the video. But with that all being said, let's get into the first point of discussion, the character customization. So right off the bat, in terms of character customization, there is not a whole lot of options because most of them are locked out. But with the few customization options that are there within the beta, they were pretty nice, I would say. There's some different hair options. You can correct hair, you can add like bangs or like ponytails and stuff like that to the character models. You can make the characters look young or very old. You could change their eye color, the kinds of pupils they had, things of that nature, stuff that you would come to expect from a character customization feature in a game like this. I will say that in this particular beta, I decided to make a character look very much like Samanosuke Akechi from the Onimusha franchise, just because this was a beta and I really didn't feel like getting like super creative with it. Some of my friends were like, why didn't you make your character from Dark Souls and Bloodborne? Because I didn't really feel like it, and plus some of the customization options were just not present within the beta. So I want to wait and see how exactly this character customization will turn out with all the features unlocked. I wonder if there's going to be some like crazy ridiculous hairs that might like conflict with the like helmets and stuff like that, or just like even the designs of the armors. But just for stupid shits and gigs, I think that that would be like one of the greatest things to see in this game once it fully comes out. So I am definitely looking forward to that. I will say though that as far as like making a character super accurate, I'm not sure if you can necessarily say you can do it. I would say you can make it close to accurate if you're trying to like recreate a character from like another franchise, but it won't be like exactly on point. I don't know, maybe if I spent like 30 hours on the character customization and like focused on every little detail to make sure that every like little wrinkle and like exact angle was absolutely correct, then maybe you could do it. But as far as I could tell with the hour that I spent on actually just making my character, that doesn't seem like it's the case, but maybe it is. So just take what I have to say with that with a huge pinch of salt, I would say, because as far as I know, you probably can with enough time. So there's something to look forward to in that regard. Now, there is one complaint I have about character creation, and that is you do have a voice grunt option, but you don't actually have a voice to speak with. That is absolutely correct. You heard right. Nioh 2 has a silent protagonist. I spoke with a friend about this who was actually very adamantly against having character creation, only because of the fact that there was that very likely chance that if we got it, our protagonist would be silent, unlike William, where William actually did interact with the other characters around him. And in this case, Nioh 2, the character does interact with the characters around them, but they're just silent, and it's not very engaging when you start going through the story as it was with Nioh 1. So I do have to agree with that complaint in this regard after being able to experience that. I do think that even if it was a generic voice that we could just I would say, I don't even know if you would call it like auto-tune, but just adjust the pitch and tone of the voice for, despite it being a very generic voice. I would rather take that as opposed to not being able to have a character that can talk and is able to interact with the other characters with his own voice. So with his or her own voice, because you can actually pick your character's gender as well in this game. But that all being said, I would say that is my only complaint so far with character customization. So maybe that could change in the full game, but chances are probably not. So we will probably have to deal with a silent protagonist throughout the entirety of this particular game. Now, in terms of new equipment, I did not get to try out all of the new weapons. I did get to try out the switchglaive, but I did not get to try out the dual axes. So as far as like those are concerned, I cannot give a full opinion, but I will say I did think that the switchglaive was interesting, but not very useful for boss fights. Maybe that will change in the full game, or maybe there was something that I was not clued in on as far as like how to use it effectively against bosses. But as far as I could tell, it was not the best weapon to use against bosses. As far as I could see, most of the stuff that I was used to using in Nioh 1 was very much the kind of stuff that would still work against the bosses in Nioh 2. So there is something to keep in mind. I will say though that if you are a fan of Ninja Gaiden, then the switchglaive will kind of feel something very similar to the Eclipse Scythe from Ninja Gaiden 2. So definitely something to try out if you're very interested in that game and are wanting to try out Nioh 2 and try out some of the new equipment there. There are some new talismans and some other like Omnio like equipment, but I did not get a full like chance to experiment with all those. There was one that would like basically act as like a life drainage. That was really good, but it was very temporary and I would not personally recommend using it. Sloth talismans were severely nerfed, I would say. Those were very ineffective. They did not last very long. I would say that if you are used to the meta that is in Nioh 1, where sloth talismans are, despite being nerfed in that game, are pretty much the go-to way to defeat bosses, don't rely on them on Nioh 2 because they are absolutely terrible, at least in terms of the beta balancing. That could change again in the full game, we don't know yet. There was also a divination talisman that I tried out, and that was a little bit interesting because now you can like temporarily temporarily perma damage or perma stop stamina regeneration on like enemies and bosses in particular. I thought that was an interesting idea until I realized that certain weapons can actually already do this permanently without the talisman, so it becomes absolutely useless. Some of the weapons will have like special attributes and they're very similar to the elements that get pre-imbued onto the weapons, but different in the sense that they are like enemy specific. So like one of them will kind of act like living weapon and will even have the weapon like start talking to you. The other will do the stamina like perma break or temp perma break, I would say. And that I was using quite a bit with a spear that I found later on in my gameplay footage. But as far as like those talismans that I was using, I would suggest to not use them as soon as you get a weapon that is like pre-imbued with that stuff. The only thing I will say about equipment, and I'm not sure if this is just them cutting it out entirely from Nioh 2 or just changing the way that it works, but it seems like certain elements have been removed or altered for specific things. Like, as far as I could tell, the only elements that were present in Nioh 2 were lightning, fire, and water. But as far as like the elements that were missing, earth was not present and wind was not present. And that was actually kind of disappointing because at least in Nioh 1, I would always run like Earth on my spears, and depending on what I was feeling like running on my sword, which was usually my primary weapon in Nioh 1, was either fire or lightning. Although on occasion I would also delve into using a earth-based sword or even a wind-based sword. So it really just depended on what I was feeling up for, but that is something that I actually really did not like because it seems like that stuff wasn't there. But then again, that stuff could be there and it just wasn't present on the full upgrade tree of like things, because there's a lot of upgrades even in the beta. I did not get all of them, but as far as what was available, there was quite a bit, and there was some stuff that was grayed out. So I'm assuming that at least in the full game there's going to be a lot more. They're just not showing us in, or they weren't showing it to us in the beta. So hopefully that is something that does get addressed, because I don't want to see stuff getting cut out from Nioh 1 that I actually did generally like as far as like gameplay mechanics and stuff like that are concerned. As far as equipment goes, that's pretty much all I have to say on it. I do like some of the new equipment, and I do think that there could be some use for it, but there does need to be some significant buffs to make it feel like it actually is useful, because as far as I can tell, it was not very useful for the most part. So moving on and discussing the gameplay changes from Nioh 1 going into Nioh 2, there really isn't a whole lot outside of some of those balance changes from like certain items and equipment that I've already kind of discussed when it came to new equipment. But that all being said, is it necessarily a bad thing? Well, this can kind of be viewed in two different angles. As far as like things that have gotten nerfed, yeah, I would say so, because the things that might have been useful in Nioh 1 aren't so useful in Nioh 2. But on the other hand, you know, with the new stuff, the few new things that they've introduced, despite it mostly feeling like the same game with minor additions, it's not a bad thing. But I will say that it really makes me wish we would have gotten a Ninja Gaiden 4 as opposed to Nioh 2. I feel as though Nioh 2, while I am still excited to get it and be able to play it when it comes out in March, I do feel as though it was fairly too soon to release Nioh 2, and that they should have went back to Ninja Gaiden and brought that back, or at least do like a Ninja Gaiden like remastered collection, or bring those games over to PC, because those games really do need a PC port. But that is a whole nother subject for another day. So that all said, I don't really know if I can say that I'm heavily disappointed by the lack of change coming from 1 going into 2, but I will say that I could understand where a lot of people may be disappointed or are not really ecstatic about like going from Nioh 1 going into Nioh 2, because not much has really changed as far as like we know going into the beta, because the full game could be a completely different experience from what the beta is. But generally speaking, the beta should be like close to accurate as far as like how that experience should be, just with of course balance changes for the full release. Now there is one thing, and this kind of will lead me into the next point that I have to talk about, and probably the final point really, is the change from Guardian Spirit to yokai form. That is like the most, I would say, significant change. But outside of that, there really isn't much to go on as far as like what is significantly different going in from Nioh 1 to Nioh 2. But maybe there is some stuff that I just haven't really noticed, or maybe stuff that I had overlooked. But as far as I could tell, as I have been saying, Nioh 2 feels like Nioh 1.5. So is that a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. You'll be the judge of that one. But this is all very subjective, at least in terms of talking about the beta and talking about the full game, because the full game could feel vastly different from the beta with balance changes and new additions. but we'll have to wait and see on that one. So in terms of the yokai form, I feel mixed on it. Basically, it is an interesting form, and as we kind of dub it in the IAS server, yokai trigger, because Devil May Cry and whatnot, but yokai trigger or yokai form, really cool, like visually speaking, looks cool, can't really complain about the design, but as far as practicality goes, that's a whole nother story. It is not a very practical thing to use in this game, especially because of the fact that bosses can literally knock you flat on your ass. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little bit spoiled from the first game because Guardian Spirit, yeah, you can take a hit, but you are going to just lose your gauge for Guardian Spirit form. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No, because you can technically regain that the more damage you deal on top of the amount of Amrita you're consistently earning, and that can sort of work to your advantage depending on certain factors and items and things of that nature, but that's a whole nother subject. That being said, this game really made me want my Guardian Spirit form because I just did not find yokai form to be very practical. It's just not a very practical thing to use in this game because 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really help a whole lot. It just feels like you're still in your basic form, your human form, and you're not really changing anything outside of just what you do with your weapon. And that could be something that is just not very fun, not very, I would say, not something to look forward to, because when you have this new ability, you have this extra form, you would hope that it can deal some massive damage and that it can feel like you have changed the tides of a battle if you use it. Because even in Nioh 1, yeah, sure, you can use your Guardian Spirit, but if you completely waste it and use it at the wrong points in battle, then it's not gonna matter if you've used it or not because you kind of wasted it. Whereas if you save it and use it on specific fights where you feel like you probably might lose, or you need it just to finish off a boss or deal some significant damage, then yeah, it's rewarding to use. And yokai form in Nioh 2 just does not feel rewarding to use. It also does not help that getting new Guardian Spirits in this game doesn't really change your form. And what I mean by this is when you fight Toshie Maeda and you earn his Guardian Spirit as you would in Nioh 1, where if you fight a boss, you earn their Guardian Spirit, or if you encountered a character within the story, you earn their Guardian Spirit. Nioh 2, when you get Toshie Maeda's Guardian Spirit after beating him in the beta, you get his Guardian Spirit. It does not change one of the form that it gets is literally the first form, or the first yokai form that you have, because the first yokai form that you have is based off of the first Guardian Spirit, because there's 3 total. There's the Fire Dog from the first game, Kato, I believe the name of the Guardian Spirit was. There's a new Shark Guardian Spirit and a new Bird Guardian Spirit that is lightning and not wind based, like in the first game where it was fire, water, wind. This game it's fire, water, lightning. So interesting change. I don't know why they went with that, but kind of going off of what I was saying earlier, it does seem like they removed 2 of the elements for no real apparent reason, and I kind of hate that, but I've already talked about that. So you get the new Guardian Spirit from Toshie. That new Guardian Spirit also happens to be a dog. Not very clear if it changes elements, possibly just because it is black and white with a red eye and a blue eye. Design wise it looks cool, but as far as like elemental abilities and stuff like that, isn't really clear if you can change it like Kujako, I think it was, the peacock that you get from Nobunaga in the first game. Not really clear if you can change elements on the fly like with that one. But you get that Guardian Spirit, and when you turn into yokai form, it is literally the first yokai form from the fire dog Kato that you get in the very beginning of the beta. I guess the best way to put it is that it's not a very exciting thing to hear, because when you get new shit, you would hope that there has been some significant change to make you want to use the new stuff. But in Nioh 2, at least as far as the beta is concerned, because they could have used that as a placeholder for the beta and that could change in the full game. But if it does not change in the full game and it remains to be the same, if yokai forms are exactly the same just based on the guardian spirit element rather than the guardian spirit, then it will not be very motivating to get new guardian spirits, or rather use them for that matter, I would say, unless if like certain stats are better than others, and at that point it would just feel as though guardian spirits are really just there as a stat thing, and at that point you might as well just have it where you can adjust the stats and just remove the guardian spirits altogether. I don't think they should do that, because I actually do really like the guardian spirits, and to be quite frank, if I had to choose between yokai form and guardian spirit, I would choose the guardian spirit, only because having the guardian spirit seems more interesting. It's more practical because you can actually tank a hit, unlike in yokai form. And I don't know, I just think, like, really thinking about it, every guardian spirit felt like its own character, as opposed to getting the yokai form, where yokai form just feels like you're having a cheap devil trigger and you can't even tank a hit. Like, somebody could just walk up to your character, slap the shit out of them, they'd fall to the ground and be like, well, why'd you do that? I should have been able to tank that, but I can't, because reasons. And that's just not fun. Like, that's not very exciting. Having, this extra form, it should be exciting. It should be a reward to use, just like Guardian Spirit was a very rewarding thing to use when you earned the gauge, filled up the gauge, and started fighting harder enemies that normally you wouldn't be able to tank with normal abilities. Granted, you could fight enemies with normal abilities and you could win, but that's going to be a challenging fight if you're a very low level and you're new to the game and you don't know what the hell you're doing. So there is that. Ultimately, if I had to choose between yokai form and guardian spirit, as I said before, guardian spirit, no questions. Anyway, to have some things wrapped up for the overall thoughts of the Nioh 2 beta, I thought that it was actually rather enjoyable despite the negative things that I had to say about it. I do think that the character customization is really good, and I can't wait to see all of the options that are going to be available within the full game. I cannot wait to see if there's any more new equipment that's going to be included in the full game. And I do want to give the chance to equipment that I never got the chance to really try out, especially the dual axes. Hopefully there are some significant changes going in from Nioh 1 to Nioh 2, because the big problem with Nioh 2 is that it so far feels like Nioh 1.5 rather than a legitimate sequel. Whether that's a bad thing is really subjective, so take that for what you will. And as far as the yokai form goes, I still stand by what I said earlier. I do think that the guardian spirit is better, but that could change within the release of the full game or within a following beta. We'll have to wait and see. But that all said, I'd like to know what you all thought of the Nioh beta if you had played it, the Nioh 2 beta, I should say, because Nioh already had its beta, it's already out. So what did you all think of the Nioh 2 beta? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel similar opinions, or did you have similar opinions, I should say, to some of the things that I talked about in today's video? And is there some things that I might have overlooked that you think I should have touched upon, as far as like what they should do to address some fixes or changes going in from this particular beta to possibly a second beta or even the full game? That all said, I hope you all enjoyed. Feel free to follow me if you are new to the channel, and give the video a like if you liked it. Maybe feel free to comment and share those opinions like I said before. And with that all said, you can also follow me on Twitter. I should mention that too before I go. Now, with all that said, I will see you all in the next one. I do have a Resident Evil 3 remake video coming out very soon, so just look forward to that. And with that all said, I will see you all in the next one. Matane.